Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series, where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program.
Hello and welcome. I am Jessica Hahl from Books Inc. in the Bay Area, and I am delighted to be joining the Indies Introduce author Kaitlyn Cavalancia. Kaitlyn Cavalancia grew up devouring mystery and fantasy novels, certain that the right wardrobe would contain a door to another world. She's an orthodontist who fights crooked teeth during the day and writes books brimming with murder and magic at night. Currently, she lives in Western Pennsylvania with her husband, son, and a dog. Mystery Royale goes on sale January 7th. Kaitlyn, thank you so much for joining me.
Jessica, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I was so invested in Mystery Royale from moment one. So my first question for you is, would you accept a suspicious invitation to compete for an inheritance?
Well, I'd like to think that I'm adventurous and daring enough to accept the invitation. And I think that the delivery method of the letters themselves would be enough to convince me. The fact that they're hinting at something magical. I mean, if I find a letter concealed in my breakfast burrito, I have to know how and why it got there. So I think I definitely would have to go. I think if I didn't, my childhood self would just never forgive me. So I think I would go.
Excellent. How far do you think you would have made it through the mystery if you accepted the Stoutmeyer invitation in particular?
I think if I could stay calm enough and get past the murder and not be rattled by the Stoutmeyer family themselves, a group of eccentric, highly opinionated, certainly intimidating people, then I think I'd have a fair chance. I'm just a very inquisitive person. So I love puzzles. I love riddles. I definitely wouldn't sleep, not even an hour while I was there, until I had this thing solved. So I think if I could get past the murder, I might have a fair chance at doing okay.
Excellent. A lot of the moments of mystery hinge around a character Xavier's parties. And I'm curious if there is a party that you wish you could attend, either one of the ones that happens in the books or one of the ones that is hinted at in the books.
Yeah. So I love this question, but it's like a difficult one because I have the unfair advantage of knowing what's lurking at these parties and what dangers are beneath. I think they all appear magical and enchanting, but once you're there, there's something more sinister under the surface. So I think I would actually choose the card party. I think if there was a tiny knight folded from playing cards who arrived to escort me to a party full of gambling and games in the billiards room, I think I would just be delighted and enchanted. I've always been enamored by tiny things. I remember when I was little, I had a little book and it would teach you how to craft tiny teacups and tiny cakes. And I think if there was a set of miniature kings and queens folded from paper serving drinks, it just sounds like a good time.
You in your bio it mentions C.S. Lewis and going through a magical wardrobe, and reading this, I felt like it was sort of smashing Labyrinth and Knives Out. And so I'm curious, what books might you bring along on your Stoutmeyer Mystery Royale to help you kind of get through to the end, and maybe arrive victorious?
I think it kind of sounds silly, but I think I would have to first pack a variety of textbooks, different subjects. Silly answer, but Mullery does really, does well in the competition because she has such an aptitude for school. And that's like no coincidence. Mullery is me when I was 16 years old. I was the kid that, yes, read my summer reading books 5 times, and I was always taking notes. And I think that that would be the first thing I would pack. And then I'd have to bring, I guess this is not technically a book, but just blank notebooks, because we all know the best way to solve a murder mystery is with excellent note taking. So I would have to do that. And then I think as a lover of books, I would bring something I love to read. Probably maybe Karen McManus or Holly Jackson. I think they're like the queens of mystery thrillers, and it would just keep me in the right mystery thriller mindset to have those books on the journey.
Excellent. One of the things that enchanted me from the beginning is Mystery Royale is told from multiple perspectives. And so I'm curious, which character's voice came to you first, and which character's point of view did you enjoy inhabiting the most as you were writing?
So the very first idea I had about the book, I remember so vividly. It woke me at like 3 a.m. And I remember I was like in a cold sweat, and I just wrote it down in this notebook on my bedside table. And I had this image of a girl, and her mom had just burned their house down. And the only thing she left her was a warning: run if the strange finds you. And at the time, it didn't really make sense, but it was one of those ideas that just kept haunting me and haunting me and haunting me until I finally wanted to write it. And so I guess in a way, Mullery found me first, because that was the first thought I had of her. But oddly enough, she was the hardest one to write. I think because she has a quieter demeanor, and I think that can be powerful, but it just takes more finesse. The other characters are very polarizing, and it was like a lot of action, and she's kind of quieter. But I did enjoy writing her. I would say my favorite perspective was Lyric. He just has such a troubling backstory, such a complicated relationship with his uncle, and just so much pent-up anger towards his family, that I felt his scenes were like dramatic and explosive and also deeply heartfelt. And so I'm not an easily angered person, but it was kind of exhilarating to tap into a different mindset and write from his perspective.
I loved Lyric.
I'm glad. I love Lyric too.
There were so many twists, red herrings, false trails. I felt like I had this just giant conspiracy board in the margins as I was reading. And so I'm curious about the writing process for that, because it's a lot to keep track of. How did you avoid getting lost in this labyrinth?
Well, thank you for saying that. I have always loved mysteries. Like, my earliest memory is reading these old Nancy Drew books, like original from 1940. They like smelled old, and they had like mysterious inscriptions to uncles and aunts inside because they were all secondhand, and I just devoured them. And then when I got older, my dad loves thrillers, mystery movies, so we would always watch. And the game was always, how fast can we guess the killer? Like within 10 minutes of when it started, can we guess who did it? And the best ones were always the ones that you never knew, right up until the end. And so I knew I wanted a mystery that I myself like to read and watch, one where I was guessing, guessing, guessing. And even at the reveal, you're still not sure, is this it? And so the first thing I did is I made sure I had like the central artery of the book. So who dies, how, when, how does it end? And then from there, kind of branch out. And something I do when I'm plotting is I'll plant what I'll call threads. So I'll have a character say something suspicious or hide something in their pocket or be in a room they shouldn't be, and I have no idea where it's going to go, but I'm planting all these little threads. And then I like to think that my subconscious, as I'm writing, is remembering where they are. And when one makes sense, I'll just drag and pull that thread through the story. And so it's seeding all these little bits of doubt throughout that I think makes a great mystery.
I hope I found many of them. I'm sure
Yes.
I missed some.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, I'm so looking forward to January 7th, when I can put this book on the shelf at my store, and at my home. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm curious though, bonus question, um, when will we get to hear more from these characters?
Yeah, so they will be back. The sequel will come out 2026. And I actually sent the first draft to my editor in September. And so I'm just super excited about it. It was so fun to write a book where I already knew the characters and the world because I could really expand and layer the story. There's a new mystery, kind of hints at the end of book 1 of what that will be. Some new characters, lots of familiar faces, and big twists, big turns.
I can't wait.
Yes, me either. Yay.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the Bookstore Education Podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!